Hello everyone and shalom. I'm Agi Wittich from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and today I would like to share with you my preliminary findings from my doctoral research in the field of Iyengar yoga for women. As I see it, it's one of the most interesting phenomena in contemporary yoga today, and maybe I can convince you of this in this short talk. So today I will talk about what is Iyengar yoga for women, how and by whom it was developed, and why it deserves our attention and is so interesting. So before I go into that, I would like you to consider Iyengar yoga for women as a crossroads or a meeting point of different cultures, of different sets of belief, of tradition or let's say faith and science, and also a meeting point of genders. We will go back to this at the end of the talk. So for the last 8 years now, I've been studying Indian culture, philosophy, and religions in the Department of Comparative Religion. And for the last 15 years, similarly to other researchers of contemporary yoga, I've also been practicing yoga. Now, I'm also a certified Iyengar yoga teacher. This is a disclosure. But I would also like to emphasize that the certification process in the Iyengar yoga tradition, it takes a minimum of 6 years of serious effort, cultivation of a daily self-practice for several hours, a weekly participation in classes with senior teachers, observation of such classes, assisting in remedial special classes, learning about Indian philosophy, different Sanskrit terminology that is supposed to be used in classes, and more. So this is taken very seriously in the Iyengar yoga tradition, and I will explain more. So I see Iyengar. It's not working anymore. I see the yoga tradition or yoga as combined from theory and practice. And in my research, I try to better understand both. So actually, this research came out as a question from the mat, let's say, from my own practice. I remember the first time when I told my Iyengar yoga teacher that I had my period. She then told me I cannot practice the same as the rest of the class. She told me I would have to avoid certain postures, such as inversions or strenuous twists. But she also told me I should practice certain poses in a different way, so I should use adjustments or an adaptation of the practice. I needed to use certain props and so on. So of course I obliged. But the first thing I felt that I was being punished for something I didn't do. I was excluded from the class. Then also the feminist in me felt outraged because I felt like I could do everything like everyone else again. So then I realized it was not a personal thing. I realized that every woman entering an Iyengar yoga class practices in a different manner during this time of the month. Some practice along with the group, but then do some postures in a different way. But some, and even I did it after a time, take a special chart, go to the corner of the room, and practice a whole different sequence, specialized for menstruation in a different pace, using different duration of time for each pose, using all sorts of props and all that. And as I was practicing this, I came to realize the remedial effects that these practices had on my own body. So my cramps disappeared, my headaches that I used to get during my period dissolved. From a mental point of view, I felt more secure and more energized in my body. So I thought this is quite interesting. I shared these experiences with my friends who practice in different schools of yoga, and they told me this was not the case in their classes. Some told me women in their periods are not supposed to attend an asana class at all. Some told me they are attending classes and they're practicing the same as men because business as usual. And some told me, well, menstruating ladies, the same as pregnant ladies, the same as people with back aches or headaches, they should practice as much as they can, as much as they feel like it. So then I realized this is an exceptional for the Iyengar yoga tradition and worth researching. Some interesting research was done already in the past about Iyengar yoga. Here is the very, very short list. But these are scholars that inspired me and also gave me a better understanding of the theoretical background of what I was looking into. Now, I look at Iyengar yoga not as the life and teaching of BKS Iyengar, and not only at the influence that he had on contemporary yoga today, but I look at it as a tradition. Okay, the Iyengar Yoga is an institute today. The institute was established in 1975 and is still very active today. It oversees all the activities of all yoga centers worldwide. Iyengar Yoga is now taught in more than 72 countries around the world. It assures the uniformity of syllabus taught in all classes. They conduct workshops, they oversee teachers' training, and so on. They also have publications. So in my research, I use an in-depth textual study. You might recognize the well-known Light on Yoga on the left-hand side. This book, published in 1966, was well researched. However, there are many more books in the Iyengar yoga tradition, some written later on by BKS Iyengar, some by his family members, and some by his students who became senior yoga teachers. However, not all the information is written down. In this tradition, much and most of the information is given orally, and it's quite of a secretive tradition. So what is written down is for the public, and the higher knowledge or the more exclusive knowledge is held for teachers and advanced students. So I thought I should look also into recordings of classes of mainly Geeta Iyengar in order to better understand the phenomena, and also I'm conducting interviews. So I was fortunate enough to interview, you can see on the left-hand side, Prashant, the only son of BKS Iyengar. On the left-hand side, Abhijata, his granddaughter, Matilda already mentioned. And I would like to draw your more attention to Geeta Iyengar, who I see as the main developer of Iyengar yoga for women. I also interviewed senior teachers of Iyengar yoga. Now, senior teachers are not only teachers who have been practicing and teaching for more than 30 years, so 3 decades of teaching Iyengar yoga, but they are also an important link from the point of view of passing on the knowledge. They are the ones who are conducting the teachers' training de facto. They are the ones who are promoting Iyengar yoga around the world. These senior teachers have to visit Pune yearly, at least for 1 month, and so on. So they have a very important job in this lineage or in this tradition. They oversee also the teachings of junior teachers such as myself. So, what is Iyengar yoga for women? Let me answer this with a very brief quotation from one of the interviews I had with a senior teacher. So referring to BKS Iyengar, she says, he made special women's classes because he had the feeling the practice should be different. This is why he was developing and was the first teacher to teach women. Now, we do know of other teachers teaching women prior to BKS Iyengar, such as his own teacher, Krishnamacharya, but what I think she meant was that BKS Iyengar was the first to adjust or alter the yoga practice to suit the health needs of women. So, why do women have different health needs? It's not only, so health is seen from the point of physical, mental, and also emotional, and the main difference that is seen is the six cycles of a woman's life. So from puberty to menstruation, pregnancy, postpartum, pre- and post-menopause, and to each cycle of life there is a special sequence that is to be practiced. Here is another quote, not from an interview but from a book, Lois Steinberg's Geeta Iyengar's Guide to a Woman's Yoga Practice, and she shares with us her own experience, and she says, I practice with my cycle, that is her monthly cycle, that is following premenstrual, menstrual, and postmenstrual practices. I remain healthy. When I stray, my period becomes uncomfortable, my fibroids increase in size. I rarely stray, it's not worth it. So very briefly, Iyengar yoga has, as I see it, three main features that are specific to this tradition: alignment or a balancing of the anatomical body in order to have a better flow of the energy. Sequencing and timing refers to a special arrangement of poses, and timing a special duration for each pose in order to get the maximum effect. Adjustments and props, so Matilda talked a bit about that in her captivating talk. And here is my first example. So in Iyengar yoga for women, these three components are combined. Here we see Supta Baddha Konasana, where the spine is supported, thank you, with a bolster. The head is supported with a folded blanket, and the feet are held with a belt. This pose is good for menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause because it is seen as increasing the blood flow to the pelvic area, expanding the chest, and quietening the mind. I don't have enough time to go into it, but for each phase of life or for each cycle, there are even more adaptations and more props to be used. This is a generalization. Second example is of Dvipada Viparita Dandasana, done on what we call a backbender. And here this pose is also good for menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause, though in pregnancy the feet are elevated to the height of the pelvis. My last example is of these two inversions. So the Shirshasana, standing from a ropes, was already discussed earlier. And on the left and right-hand side we see Halasana, where the shoulders and thighs are supported. These postures are very recommended for pregnancy and menopause, though they are not recommended for menstruation because they reverse the blood flow to the pelvic area. So very quickly, how Iyengar yoga for women was developed. In the 1930s, BKS Iyengar started teaching both women and men. In the 50s, when he was teaching foreigners, again, both men and women, out of belief that yoga should be practiced by all and it should be adjusted for all. So he was adjusting the practice for women's needs, but he was also adjusting the practice for the needs of older people, younger people, people with all sorts of problems, out of belief of this therapeutic approach to yoga. Iyengar taught his entire family, and again I would like to draw special attention to his eldest daughter Geeta. All his family members taught yoga at a certain point. So Geeta started practicing yoga at a very young age, and she was teaching when she was 16 years old. At first she taught people in her own class and then in her school, but later on she taught alongside her father. By that I mean that BKS Iyengar was teaching a general class, mixed class for men and women. And she had a special role of gathering women with special needs at the corner of the room. So these were people in their menstruation, pregnancy, or menopause, but also women with gynecological problems. And then she was developing these special sequences for them. In an interview with her, she told me that once she was called to a house of a 17-year-old girl who did not get yet her period. The doctors didn't know what to do, the family was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things, so she started practicing Iyengar yoga. And after 3 months, the girl got her period and was very quickly married and lived happily ever after. So, more and more women were coming up to Geeta Iyengar with different problems, and she was developing these special programs for them. And here is another quote from an interview. So referring to Geeta, she said, "The need, of course, was there. Geeta ji was dealing with the women and was developing programs. There was a deep understanding of how women should practice because there were so many women, worldwide." Okay? So, this knowledge was published into a book. She started writing the book in 1971 because so many questions were arising and there was this need of publishing the knowledge to make it more accessible. The book was published in 1983 from various reasons. And this book, I can talk just an hour about this book, but this book has, when I interviewed Geeta, why did you write this book? What did you put in it? She said, "Yoga Gem for Women is specially written for women. That's why all the asanas are not included, mainly which is helpful for their stability, physical stability, mental stability, emotional stability, and also the stages of life." And similarly to Light and Yoga, this book has many depictions of postures demonstrated by Geeta, but also by her pregnant sister Vanita when she was 7 months pregnant and 9 months pregnant. Pay attention to this in the bottom line in the middle. It's a depiction of pranayama. So not only asanas were depicted, but also pranayamas. And to each there was this classification. Should it be practiced during menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause? Again, sequencing, duration, and so on. So this was not enough. More and more questions were arising. There was a greater need. And so in 1997, the first conference, or the first Women Intensive, took place in Pune, where 61 women or senior teachers around the world were gathered for 1 week in Pune. And here is Geeta Iyengar in the center next to her father, BKS Iyengar. And this is my own teacher on the left-hand side. And she still today mentions this conference and talks about how important it was and how life-changing it was for her. Thank you. The result, though, of this conference with 61 senior teachers were charts. A lot of charts that are, in a way, are codified and were not so accessible. So senior teachers could spend quite a lot of time in trying to understand these charts. But if I will try to explain quickly, on the top row we see the 6 phases of a woman's life, the 6 cycles: puberty, menstruation, pregnancy, postpartum, pre and post-menopause. This is the case of Tadasana, so the first posture Matilda mentioned. And on the bottom row there are the 6 ways of adjustments or variations and the props to be used. This was still not enough, so in the same year a demonstration took place. Sorry for the poor quality, it was in 97. Here we see Geeta on the left-hand side, and this is the case of Bharadvajasana. Here we see the normal way of practicing, let's say, without adjustments. On the chair, a demonstration of how to adjust the pose in the case of menstruation. And on the right-hand side, a pregnant woman practicing an adjustment for pregnant women. So the video made it a bit more clear, and it was also available for all practitioners, not only senior teachers, but still it was not enough. And I see this as a continuation of developing this this tradition. So in the same year, 3 articles were published in the yoga journal called Yoga Rahasya of the Iyengar yoga tradition. And only in 2005, 1 article was published about menopause. So this knowledge was there, it was practiced, but it was not published, it was not made known for the public. And so it was only that in 2006, to a request of Geeta Iyengar herself, the first book about how to adjust a practice for menstruation was published by Lois Steinberg. This book also has case studies of how women got cured or healed with these practices. Later in 2007, 2 books by Bobby Clennell, one again about menstruation and the other is about breast health, PMS issues, lactation, and breast cancer. When I talked to Bobby, I'm about to finish, when I talked to Bobby, she told me that her main motivation of writing this book was to illustrate the book so it would be more comprehensible. And the last is a book from 2010 by Rita Keller. This is a book about motherhood and so on. And another book is about to be published about menopause. So why Iyengar yoga for women deserves our attention? I really hope I already answered this question, but very briefly. 72% of all practitioners in the United States, according to 2016, are women. We don't have data yet about other countries, but I do know from my experience and from experience of other teachers that this seems to be the case all around the world, so the majority of practitioners are women. However, not all of them are practicing Iyengar yoga and might benefit from these special sequences. I know that in my own studio in Jerusalem in Israel, I do teach an adjusted practice using all sorts of variations and props, and I do see the remedial effects that it has on women. By the way, I also realized that for the remaining 28%, It could also be very beneficial, but that's another topic. So, so going back to the first slide, I would like to consider this phenomenon as a crossroad or a meeting point of different cultures, different genders of faith and science. And here are just a few questions that I find quite interesting. One is the question of authority again. So to what extent does this tradition, is it supported on tradition, self-experience, and scientific research? So in every Iyengar yoga book, there is quite a lot of quotation from other ancient, what I would call ancient yogic texts. There is a quotation and mentioning of how these texts are kind of an elaboration on what was earlier. At the same time, there is quite a lot of scientific research done on these, on Iyengar yoga for women, but not only. And what Matilda said very briefly, the importance of self-experience. So let's say as my own experience, does it validate the whole system that I feel some kind of remedial effect? Another interesting question would be how are Indian concepts, let me call them Indian concepts, are translated and understood in a Western female-dominated field, or how are concepts of yoga understood in a transnational Anglophone yoga. And for me, one of the most interesting things are that brahmacharya is explained as going hand in hand with motherhood, for example. And the last point would be in what way are feminist agendas interwoven into this tradition. As I see it, BKS Iyengar had no feminist agenda whatsoever. When talking to Geeta and reading Geeta, she's not talking of any feminist agenda explicitly. It's possible that it's hidden there. But when I speak to senior teachers who are mostly Western women, they do have these feminist agendas from all different kinds. So, thank you very much.
So we have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah. What do you say about the fact that it's always, also you mentioned that yoga for women was, or sometimes even is, always taught in a separate place for people who are having some other disabilities or whatever, having problems, being really old and not physically fit anymore, or they are women. This really strikes the feminist in me a lot. What do you say about that?
Well, there is, in every conversation I have on this topic with senior teachers, the matter of disability comes up. So this is, I also said, backaches and headaches and menstruation. So it seems to be a condition that the woman goes through. And some of the senior teachers even talk about when can a woman practice in a normal way, and some even say that from a feminist agenda, since women are different, maybe they shouldn't aspire to practice a normal way, but the feminist agenda would be to listen to your own body, to go with your own rhythm, and so on. But then again, we have other feminist agendas that are saying this is not a condition, this is a recommendation. You can practice it, but you can practice something else, and it depends on how you feel. This is also said.
So we have a question.
Yes, actually I wanted to make a comment on this final aspect of feminist studies or whatever, that I think it was be extra careful because the contemporary work that we live were already liquidated these categories, and I believe that we should just have our focus not really just regenerate this binary position between men and women. And as I see it, it's very canonical, like this Iyengar system of telling whatever in the tradition that you kind of followed with your essay. And I just wanted to make this point.
When Geeta was born, it was already, women had already a right to vote, and she was growing up. They already had a female prime minister and so on. So these things were in her surroundings, and she could have said, yes, power for the women. I mean, women should practice yoga and they should do this, but she didn't. Instead, she says women should practice yoga so they can be better householders, so they could work and then be with their husband and children. And saying this, to me, I was quite surprised to say, yeah.
So we have another question there.
Thank you for your speech. I have a question. As I understand, this yoga is only physical yoga. I mean for the health of body. If you know some maybe a philosophical concept of this, because yoga it is a union, and this is the Geeta Wittich, and if you met somewhere some philosophical explanation of this, because yoga has some special meaning, or this is just only physical exercises for health?
I would like to answer this with sort of a quote from an interview I had with Iyengar, who is seen as an authority in this tradition, and he said, gender is only an outer layers or a kosha. It's only like your clothes, and it really doesn't matter what you wear when you go to sleep or when you go into an inner consciousness. It doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman. It does matter if you want to practice asana and pranayama, because you have a different physical facts, let's say. So when you go deeper in, there is no distinguishment of gender, but on the outer layer there must be one. So this is the deeper understanding that goes through. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to have to call it a day, but thank you to Agi and thank you to our four speakers for a wonderful session.